Welcome to Fear and Greed, the week ahead. I'm Sean Aylmer. Now, normally I'd be joined by economist Stephen Koukoulas at this time on a Monday, but the Kook's on a well-deserved holiday in Greece for a few weeks. I'm really pleased to say we've got another Fear and Greed regular stepping in. Cherelle Murphy is the chief economist at EY. Cherelle, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
So before we get into this week, which is a bit of a quieter week for you economists, last week was a big one, starting with the Reserve Bank's interest rate decision. Were you surprised it was only 25 basis points and not 50 basis points?
I think the fact that it was 25 was a bit surprising, actually. The market had been priced almost for 50 basis points, and the sort of slightly more dovish tone, it certainly did kind of jar the markets a little bit, and they pulled right back on their expectations of how far the Reserve Bank would go. So I was a bit surprised.
When you read the Reserve Bank note, the Reserve Bank has its own language in a way. Do you think that most pundits have sort of said basically they're taking a breather? They're just going to, kind of give themselves some time to see data before they do much else. Is that kind of what came through to you?
I think so. They've obviously put in place now 6 monthly rate hikes in a row, and they'd probably like to know what that looks like going into the new year. It's tricky because while they certainly have pulled back on the pace of rate hikes, they still put a rate hike in. So, they still have to think forward. Central banking, I think, is best executed with a policy of least regret kind of mindset. And it seems that the most prudent move that they could have made right now was to do the 25, and that's what they've done. So, they don't really want to take it too far. They don't want to squeeze the consumer too much. They did also note that the outlook for the global economy has deteriorated recently. Yeah. And I think that was quite significant because, and clearly it has, because a global economy that is slowing down is likely to impact Australia negatively. And, that is clearly part of their thinking too.
It's ironic when we get a 25 basis point rate hike, we all cheer. Isn't that good news?
It's all relative, Sean.
It is all relative. Actually, talking about relativities, the New Zealand Central Bank, they're on a tear. They can't stop raising rates.
Yes, they are. They certainly are. So another 50 basis point rate hike from them, taking the cash rate to 3.5%, which is the 5th move this year, but the 8th move that they've put in place. So they're definitely trying to pull their inflation numbers down and probably not succeeding so far. But they, clearly they think down the track it's really important for them to be acting so aggressively. So inflation there is running at about 7.3%. Our latest number was 6.8. It's below. It's not dramatically different, but clearly they're pretty worried.
Okay, and just quickly, Cherelle, there was a bit from the Reserve Bank on Friday, the Financial Stability Review, a bit on housing, really.
Yes, the Stability Review made the point that most households are able to cope with the lift in interest rates, so they can kind of continue to service their debts. They have to obviously take out a little bit of discretionary income, which is, of course, the whole point of monetary policy, to meet these higher cash rates. But they sort of said that most households will be able to manage. They did, however, point out that a small share of borrowers, and particularly those with lower savings and higher debt, are definitely vulnerable, and they're likely to see a little bit of an increase in housing loan arrears in the months ahead. This is obviously the downside of monetary policy. It does squeeze some people to the point that it puts them in trouble, and the RBA are acknowledging that. I thought it was also quite interesting how they noted that businesses, which are for the most part actually looking to the future quite positively, have registered a sharp increase in their costs, in labour shortages and supply disruptions, and particularly in the construction industry. And that's where insolvencies have risen from very low levels. So they are kind of acknowledging also the slightly more difficult conditions that businesses are facing too.
That is a lovely segue, Cherelle, into this week, because there's not a lot going on, but a couple of bits of information which have been keenly followed recently just because they're so diverse. The first is business confidence, the National Australia Bank Business Confidence Survey, and the second is consumer confidence. The Westpac Melbourne Institute is the oldest and probably most reputable index of that. Business confidence first. They've been pretty happy.
They have. Business confidence and business conditions have been quite high. They're not quite at record highs, but they're certainly well and truly above the levels that we'd seen through the sort of woes of the COVID months. And the capital expenditure plans, which that survey also identifies as well, they've also been quite high. So it really does fit with that story, I guess, from the CapEx survey from the ABS. All these things put together do suggest that businesses, which are capacity constrained, as we know, because activity's been so strong, are actually looking forward to the future with some confidence. So that's pretty good news. So we'll get the September numbers this week.
Okay, and then the consumer confidence numbers over the run thus far have kind of told a different story.
Very different. They're pretty close to the lowest that they've been in since really the lows of COVID. So in that April 2020 month, I think was when they were worst. They're not quite at that low, but they're not too far off it. The consumers are clearly feeling the pain more than businesses. And of course, that goes back to the fact that those mortgage repayments have had to go up. And they're, I guess, at the front line of monetary policy. They're the first ones to really feel it. And I think that's really coming through. But there's also a lot of other things going on for the consumer. When we think about high electricity prices, we think about high petrol prices. It has been a difficult year for the consumer. So I guess to some extent, not surprising that they're feeling the pinch.
Yeah, although they're still spending though, because household spending seems to be reasonably robust. They just don't feel it.
It is. It's when we look at some of the forward indicators like the bank credit card data, that again is showing relatively good numbers on retail sales so far. We have to remember though that the labour market is super strong right now. The unemployment rate is very low. Also, the workforce participation rate is at record highs. So when you think about what that means for the number of dollars coming into households every week through pay packets, it's higher than it's ever been in Australia's history. So that's important because while consumers have to kind of adjust and they certainly have less discretionary income to spend because the mortgage repayments are going up, or at least most households. When you've still got a job and you've got two income earners and they're both working quite a lot of hours, in the average household, that matters. And clearly that encourages people to continue to spend.
Cherelle, have a good week.
Pleasure. Thanks.
That was Cherelle Murphy, Chief Economist at EY. I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is Fear and Greed, the week ahead.